Approve the agenda, please. And I can't see everybody, so I see Councillor Taylor got his hand up, and Councillor Andrews. All in favor?
Yes.
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 Any disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interest?
No.
Seeing none. Are we going to sing the national anthem?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I just make sure Dan's ready.
Mr. Bonato, are you on board, sir?
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Nairn. We would like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and the Odawa of the Three Fires Confederacy. This meeting is being aired on public television and or streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. This part of the record will be included in this meeting. I did not read the notice earlier, so let me read the notice for the public. Due to efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 and to protect all individuals, the council chambers at Town Hall will not be open to the public to attend council meetings until further notice. Members of the public who have an interest in the matter listed on the agenda may, up until 10 a.m. on the day of the scheduled council meeting, email councilaagenda@orangeville.ca indicating your request to speak to a matter listed on the agenda. A phone number and conference ID code will be provided to you so that you may join the virtual meeting and provide your comments to council. Members of the public wishing to raise a question during the council public meeting may begin at 7 p.m. on the evening of the council public meeting. Call 1-289-801-5774 and enter conference ID 693-665-39 #399 #. Correspondence or email submitted will be considered as public information and entered into the public record. If you require access to information in an alternate format, please contact the Clerk's Division by phone at 519-941-0440, extension 2256, or via email at clerksdepartment@orangeville.ca. So we're about to enter into our statutory public meeting, and I'm going to turn this over to Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to quickly outline the procedure we'll be following tonight. Anyone who speaks and or wants to be notified of further consideration of this topic by council to contact the Planning or Clerk's Division. Note that any information collected will be a matter of public record. We'll start off tonight with a presentation by Town Planning Division staff. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, and good evening, everyone. I'm just going to share my presentation. So as was noted, this is a statutory public meeting for plans of subdivision applications and official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications. The purpose of this public meeting is really to share information about the proposed developments and obtain questions and feedback from the community. Staff or council don't make a decision at a public meeting. It's simply a means to present the applications and receive feedback, which form our part of our evaluation of the applications. So Just jumping right in, this is essentially a snapshot of the applications. Again, it's plans of subdivision, official plan amendments, and zoning bylaw amendments filed by a group of landowners for lands generally located within sort of the northwest quadrant of the town, specifically nearest to the corner of the intersection of Hanson Boulevard and Blind Line. They were received actually July of 2017, and following some dialogue to obtain the information we need to receive and process the applications, they were later deemed complete as of August in 2018. So it's two plans of subdivision, and I'll get into discussing them in a little more detail momentarily, but essentially it's a total of 152 detached dwellings, as well as different blocks for various land uses, which I'll explain further. So the slide in front of you shows the two subject lands for both of the respective subdivision plans. The image on the left of the slide is the first plan we'll discuss, and it's what we refer to as the Alden Hill subdivision. These lands are, as you can see, they're situated closest to that Hanson Boulevard and Blind Line intersection, as well as the adjacent development to the south, encompassed by Meyer Drive and as well as Aitken Crescent. Then moving towards the right side of the screen, that's the second subdivision plan referred to as the Alden Hill, or sorry, the Transmetro subdivision. And as you'll see, it's sort of an extension from the Alden Hill plan, and it is situated nearest to the Eastview Crescent development up at sort of the northeast corner. So here is an aerial photograph showing the subject lands in their current state. As you'll see, they're predominantly vacant, consisting of a mixture of field area as well as some vegetated area. If you look towards the this sort of more densely vegetated area, this is part of that branch of the Menorah Creek, which separates the proposed development area from the existing residential community. And we'll talk a little more about that later. The surrounding uses, as you can see, are existing low density residential within that Eastview Crescent area, as well as sort of to the south of the plans, which consists of a previous phase of development that was pursued by the current landowner group or parties of the current landowner group. So here is the first of the two subdivision plans. Again, this is the Alden Hill subdivision. It is comprised of 90 detached dwelling lots centered around the internal roadways. There's various blocks for medium density development. This first one here is a low density multiple dwelling block envisioned to be townhouse units, sort of a condominium townhouse cluster. That's anticipated to include approximately 70 units. Then there's another development block over here, which is anticipated to be more of a medium density product, consisting perhaps of low-rise apartments or stacked townhouses. The unit figures for this is anticipated to be a projected maximum of upwards of 183 dwelling units, and that's based on that maximum density range for a medium density designation up to 99 units per hectare. And there's also a neighborhood commercial block situated right at the corner of this this internal roadway in Hanson Boulevard. And then the balance of the lands, this is a large open space conservation area to reflect the existing natural features associated with that Menorah Creek corridor. So this is the second plan. This is the Transmetro subdivision, and as you'll see, it sort of extends from the Alden Hill plan we just spoke about. It consists of 62 detached dwellings, again, oriented off the internal private roads. This is a block. It's situated in the central area of the plan. It's anticipated to be a future public elementary school site. This has been included in this plan through consultation with the Upper Grand District School Board. And then as you venture further to the north here, there's a block of land identified for future use. And the reason why it's future use at this time is because these lands are actually situated upon a designated area as part of a broader employment area designation as you sort of venture west from the subdivision plan. And so this use here is still sort of to be determined. going forward. And again, there's this open space corridor here, which was discussed as part of the Alden Hill subdivision, again, reflective of the that existing creek corridor. So the slide in front of you is really a compilation of both subdivision plans combined. Shows how basically the pieces fit together. There's also a third subdivision plan here. This is what we refer to as the Edgewood Valley Phase 2B development. It's called 2B because it's actually seen to be a sort of a westward extension of the 2A plan that's already been built out. It was approved and built out around 2011. The Edgewood Valley 2B plan is the oldest of the three. It was submitted in 2007. It had public meetings in 2010 and again in 2014. Its processing did not proceed because the development lands to the north that are now encompassed under the current applications of Alden Hill and Transmetro, those development lands needed to be understood or determined because these developments feed into the 2B plan. So it did not proceed until that information was known. And once the Alden Hill and Transmetro plans were submitted, that then enabled the 2B plan to proceed. One of the other important things I wanted to talk about is the additional segments of Hanson Boulevard. As council may be familiar, this has been quite a point of interest for the community and for council as well. Our expectation is that with Edgewood 2B, that plan being probably the most farthest advanced in the process, that as you can see, it includes a large portion of the Hanson Boulevard extension as well as the additional lands. Presuming that that plan is the one to move forward, it will only do so to ensure that the entirety of the Hanson Boulevard link is completed before the rest of the development proceeds. So that's an important piece I just wanted to share. So this is essentially a table that shows the unit stats for all three plans combined. As you can see, when you factor in the Edgewood 2B plan, we're looking at an upward estimate of approximately 545 units. You'll notice some of the figures here have a little asterisk beside them, and that is because these figures are based on the upward limit of the number of units proposed. Again, that's based on the maximum density permissions for those blocks. So here's the official plan designations as they exist today. As you can see, they're predominantly designated low density residential. There's also the open space conservation designation that reflects the existing natural features. And then as well as the existing neighborhood commercial block that's actually situated at the very corner of Hanson and Blind Line. So this is an image showing the proposed official plan amendment. It is largely resemblant to the development layout configuration that we just talked about. As you'll see, it's proposing to first and foremost refine the open space conservation boundary. And as you'll see with sort of application submissions, the boundaries of those features are refined through the site-specific evaluation that's submitted in support of that application submission. And that's done in consultation, of course, with Conservation Authority review. Other aspects of this amendment include redesignated the central part to facilitate that proposed future school block, as well as to designate those medium and low density multiple residential blocks to designations that would facilitate their proposed development. So in terms of the zoning bylaw, the lands are zoned within a development zone. Quite frankly, this zone permits only existing uses, so there's no additional future use permissions included with this zone category. And the reason is because it is anticipated or to identify lands intended for future development, and the future development then requires council approval of a zoning amendment in order for that development to proceed. So here's a list of the proposed amendments. Again, it's generally resemblant of the proposed development plans that we just talked about, with the zone categories proposed to correspond with the particular uses proposed within the subdivision plans. In terms of consultation so far, admittedly, most of the comments received have been in response to the notice of this public meeting issued earlier this month. The comments could be perhaps categorized as questions about the timing for the Hanson Boulevard connection and how that relates to the proposed plans moving forward. Of course, there's been an interest in the protection of the natural areas associated with the Nora Creek branch, and perhaps seeking assurance as to how those features will be protected and maintained, as well as a question about any assessments having been undertaken to evaluate the creek itself, and questions about how groundwater supply and nearby municipal wells will be protected in evaluating this development, these development proposals. And then some comments as well about a desire to see an attractive development and ensure it's comprehensively planned, and a desire to see an appropriate trail connection system, and of course, questions seeking assurance that appropriate parking will be provided within these developments. So as a result, agency comments, again, this was received in 2018, and the reason why this is only proceeding to a public meeting at this point is because the review of 2018 yielded some somewhat substantial changes needed to be undertaken to the plan in response to the agency consultation that occurred at that time. The most important of which is the inclusion of a future school site, which is now included within the Transmetro plan, and of course some other matters to do with further refinement or iteration of those open space conservation blocks, as well as the neighborhood commercial block. You had perhaps noted in the original plan concept discussed earlier, the corner of the Hanson Boulevard and Blind Line intersection, that's actually a stormwater management facility that's situated on lands designated for neighborhood commercial purposes. So that then necessitated the need to shift that block to a location more centrally within the proposed plans. So far, there have been certain agencies that have expressed no concerns or requested typical conditions of draft approval to be incorporated as part of these applications. These are generally our utility companies as well as selected school boards. And we've received some more detailed comments for some of the some agencies, particularly the Credit Valley Conservation. They are our technical advisor and also have some regulatory authority over much of these lands with respect to the open space conservation areas. They've provided technical comments based on their review of the applicant's hydrogeology study, their environmental impact study, as well as their functional servicing and stormwater management reports. Upper Grand District School Board has provided comments with respect to their request for a school site to be accommodated within the proposed development. Our Infrastructure Services Environment Division has been evaluating this with respect to the application's adherence to the Source Water Protection Plan policies, essentially to ensure that there will not be any impacts to our drinking water resources as well as nearby municipal wells. And our Infrastructure Services Transportation and Development Division has also been reviewing this quite carefully with respect to the matters to do with the road layout, servicing, infrastructure, and stormwater management. So where we're at is essentially an earlier stage in the process. Again, it's to obtain feedback, answer questions to the extent we can at this point, and take the feedback received into consideration as part of our overall review and evaluation of these applications. We consider this as part of our review and with the expectation that the comments would be addressed, and both the comments of the public as well as comments from agencies, and when we arrive at a point through our ongoing review where we feel that those comments have been resolved or addressed, we then find ourselves in a position to move forward with a recommendation for a council decision. Following which point that sort of attains the first level of approvals, i.e. a land use or a feasibility for approval with respect to a draft plan of subdivision approval. Following that point, there's further approval processes that have to be pursued in terms of the actual detailed design of the subdivision infrastructure, as well as further site level developments with respect to some of those multi-unit developments within the plan. So that concludes my presentation. The applicant, I believe, is also present with us. We'll be sharing a little more information about the proposed developments, and we'll both be able to answer any questions that may arise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. We'll now have a presentation by Jim Hughes on behalf of the applicants, Transmetro Properties, Alden Hill Developments, and Edgewood Valley Developments. Go ahead, Mr. Hughes.
Thank you. As noted, my name is Jim Hughes, and I'm representing the three property owners that share ownership of these plans, being Edgewood Valley Developments Limited, Alden Hill Developments Limited, and Transmetro Limited. I'd like to, first of all, thank Mr. Ward for his presentation. It was quite comprehensive. And I'd also like to thank your worship and members of council for the ability to provide a brief presentation tonight. Brandon was quite comprehensive. I don't necessarily want to add to what he said. I would, however, like to try and share my screen so I can provide a brief presentation. So if you'll bear with me, let's see if I can do this. So I guess I'd like to ask if everybody can see my screen.
Yes.
All right.
Are you able to make it larger?
I believe I am. It will make the rest of the slides larger as well. Is that all right?
That's
Did you
better.
put it in presentation mode by chance? It's the bottom right beside the volume where you were. There's a little insignia there.
Yeah. I guess that's not it. How about slideshow mode? Is that what you're referring to?
I think that's better.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay. When it's in presentation mode, I guess I can still zoom it in. No. Yeah, I guess I can. Now I have to figure out how to bring it back again. Sorry. Oh, there we go. I'm sorry. I'm not as familiar with Microsoft Teams as I wish I was. In any event, I wanted to give everybody just a general sense of, the constraints that we were dealing with when we developed this subdivision. Part of the constraints was developing it piecemeal. So we started with Edgewood and we moved on with applications for Alden Hill. And those applications were, for all intents and purposes, stalled because we needed Transmetro to join in. So those applications were added as well. And once all the applications were added, we were able to assess the entire community as one community, and we were able to properly assess the environmental features, the hydrogeology, etc. So the guiding principles for the subdivision as it's developed, the street network, is really, it's a community that needs to support the ecological integrity of the site, and that references both the north and the south Monora Creek tributaries. The north, of course, which crosses to the north, and the south tributary, which crosses to the south. Maybe I'll move to the next slide. This of course is the north tributary of the Monora Creek, and this of course is the south tributary. As Mr. Ward noted, this is the Edgewood Phase 2A development, which is developed and built out. The next application we filed was in this location. We called it Edgewood 1B. Then we filed an application for Edgewood 2B, and it included the construction of a stormwater management pond in this location. The reason being is that a portion of this, like Edgewood 2A, discharges into this pond, but there is a small portion of Edgewood 2B that could not be accommodated into this pond because its tributary area discharged in a different direction. So we did need to construct a pond in this location. We thought it prudent to design the pond that would ultimately be required for the entire development. This proved very problematic because we weren't able to do all the hydrogeology, and we weren't able to do all the environmental studies for all of the land, so we made it our best guess. Unfortunately, our best guess wasn't appropriate, and what we needed to do was combine all of the lands together and then embark on additional environmental studies and hydrogeology studies as they related to the Transmetro lands in this location. I'll move. The next slide that I'm showing illustrates, I think, as Mr. Ward's slides did, the property boundaries of the respective plans. They don't necessarily reflect the property boundaries of the ownership, but they reflect the property boundaries of the plans, this being Edgewood 2B, this being Alden Hill. And I'd like to note that the Alden Hill plan includes ownership of Edgewood, Transmetro, and Alden Hill all combined together. And then, of course, the Transmetro plan is strictly a Transmetro ownership. So the community itself is designed to support the long-term sustainability of the environment that surrounds it. We wanted it to be designed so that it would have extremely distinct neighborhoods, which is why we've planned the detached transitions to street townhouses in this location, and then further transitions into condominium townhouses in this location. Likewise with Alden Hill against Hanson, we've provided the same thing, townhouses in this location. These townhouses will front directly onto Hanson, so you won't see any driveways. This block, which Mr. Ward referenced as including both a neighborhood commercial, which would be in this location, and the balance would be a medium density residential. We are not certain yet what belongs on this block. We wanted to have further discussion with planning staff and perhaps mayor and council so that we could determine what would be the best use for this particular block, in light as well, in light of, I guess the official plans that are in place. The Transmetro plan has detached in this location, and the Upper Grand District School Board school site is tentatively located in this part of the Transmetro plan. What we're really trying to do is provide visual connectivity to the environment via the stormwater management plan and the trail networks that can spin off of the road network around this pond. The Edgewood Valley Trail Network will come this way, and it is part of the Edgewood 2B plan. And there is an existing, for lack of a better word, sort of Tommy Thompson trail network that the surrounding residents, I think, have taken advantage of. And you can see through the aerial photograph some of the connections. It's our hope that what we could do is possibly formalize those trail networks just a little bit to provide better connectivity to the existing trail network. I'm going to go down to my next slide. What it does is provides a few site statistics. I think Mr. Ward identified what the unit counts were. He noted on a couple of the plans that there were unit numbers with asterisks, notably the 183, which is located in this part of the plan. Again, we don't know what we're going to put there. I really don't think we'll hit 183 units. I think we'll end up with something smaller, but that's subject to future discussion. So on the Transmetro plan, it is about 51 acres. Of that 51 acres, 23 is open space, 6 acres is park. Of the Alden Hill plan, it's about 35 acres, and there's about 7 acres of open space. Edgewood, 23 and 5. So a total of 109 acres. There's about 35 acres that is dedicated to open space or environmental protection, in addition to another 6-acre park. The unit breakdown between 40-foot singles, between 40-foot singles is about 87 units, 45-foot singles 106, and 50-foot singles there's 10. Townhouse units, they are predominantly 20, 22, and some 24-foot product. And the unit breakdown is as follows: 54, 51, 17, and another 16. And then, of course, there's the medium density, again, which is located here. We're really not sure, but the plan provides for up to about 524 units. I think Mr. Ward had a slightly higher amount, and that is because the unit count in the unit in the Edgewood 2B, Mr. Ward had it a little bit higher to conform with the official plan designation, whereas we have already contemplated a plan that provides for about 51 units identified here on the Edgewood 2B plan. As I noted, the ownership of the entire community is a little bit varied. In yellow is lands owned by Transmetro Limited. This section of the plan is owned by Alden Hill Developments Limited, and then the balance of these 3 plans is owned by Edgewood Valley Developments Limited. So from here, I'd like to just give Mayor and Council just and of course the public a bit of an idea of what we see being developed on these lands in these various areas. So for the detached, we expect to see, units that would be similar to this, generally 2-car garages with 2-car parking spots outside. It's a fairly typical development, very similar to what is existing in Phase 2A, which was previously developed. For the townhouses, there will be areas with traditional condominium townhouses, and they will be traditional units with garages in the front and condominium roads out front. We haven't gotten to the architectural details yet, but I'm just providing certain slides just to give an idea of the unit type. I also noted some of the units along Hanson Boulevard that would be developed without driveways to the street. They of course would have garages and parking areas in the rear. They would also be developed as condominium townhouse tenure. The other area, the contentious area, which was identified as a 183 unit area, again, it's a medium density or multiple density residential, RM1. We can develop it with either a low-rise building, this is a relatively modern example of a low-rise building, and we can also do it with stacked townhouses, something similar to this, that would have parking perhaps underneath, and then pedestrian walkways connecting the units above grade as well. Again, the natural heritage system in this development is of prime interest to us. We've worked very, very hard to try to preserve it and maintain it. The Conservation Authority in the town has likewise worked very hard with us to ensure that its integrity is preserved. So I've provided a brief slide of the walkway system that we'd like to see in portions of it. I note that certain other areas of walkways would likely have to be paved so that they're multi-use. I've also provided just a brief visual, of a school site. We have located the school site on the Transmetro property, and it is cushioned between an existing woodlot and the municipal road network. We're trying to convince the Upper Grand District School Board to take advantage of a portion of the woodlot to perhaps employ an outdoor kindergarten, but we're not sure how far that will go. We're not even sure if the school site will ultimately be built. It depends on the demand of the area. In the event the school site isn't built, you can see on this slide what the potential road network would otherwise look like. The other issue is the Hanson Bridge, which Mr. Ward referred to as well. What I've done is I've taken some fairly large liberty in providing a visual of what I personally expected that bridge to look like. I don't expect it will be a bridge with abutments. I expect it would be a culverted crossing, and then somewhat of a, somewhat of a visual construction to make the bridge look attractive, especially to the trail networks that will be leading up to it. There is a small section of neighborhood commercial as well, adjacent to that 183 unit block. We're not certain exactly how that will be designed. It is a relatively small site. It's only about an acre. So we see it being as, probably small retail and small services. It will need to be nestled up close to the intersection, similar to this visual. and the architecture we would like to see, to complement the balance of the subdivision. That is the end of my presentation. I would like to thank you for listening, and I would like to make myself available for any questions that either the mayor, council, or the public may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hughes. We'll now take questions from council. I do have a quick one for Mr. Ward. In regards to the Hanson Bridge, did I hear you say that basically no construction would take place until the Hanson extension is complete?
That's essentially correct, Deputy Mayor McIntosh. We would want to ensure, as part of the draft approval process for the subdivisions, whichever proceeds in first, and presumably that would be the Edgewood Valley 2B plan, because it is perhaps farthest along in the process, that it be conditioned as such to ensure that the that link of Hanson Boulevard be completed as part of the registration process. So as the applicant proceeds to could build the actual connection piece, i.e. the roadway, we then also have our bridge construction as well that we're sort of timing to align with that. And we've been sort of pursuing that process accordingly. So we wanted to try to time it so it sort of lines up well with this development proceeding. So that you wouldn't necessarily have one completed ahead of the other, only to wait for the other one to advance.
Thank you. I look forward to that. Mayor Brown and then Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to make some comments. This is a very important and impactful development, primarily that connection of Hanson. The neighborhood to the west there has been very vocal of the need to connect on. So we're on that path now, and from my conversations with staff, sounds like if this, gets the site plan gets approved in the near future, that sometime in 2022 we might be able to have construction ongoing for both the roadway and the bridge. It's exciting to see another elementary school. I know we had concerns about flooding, so I know there was an expanded stormwater management plan there. This looks like a nice development, mixed use residential, and lots of open space conservation and parkland as part of the project. So I like what I see. Over to Councillor Taylor.
Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hughes and to Mr. Ward. I guess it's reiterating some of the comments that the mayor has stated. I mean, the development looks nice. I think it's well thought through. I'm sure there's going to be some questions from residents in terms of the densities, but my focus is still on the Hanson Street Bridge, and I just want to make sure I understand it, and I'm putting myself into people's shoes that live in that neighborhood. The idea of new home construction occurring prior to the bridge being made and opened would be difficult for those that have already lived in there almost 10 years. So I'm just curious, the mayor kind of made his comments about 2022. How do you see this going down? Does the bridge, when in your mind does the bridge open? And visually, do we have new people living in that area in these developments prior to the bridge being open? Because, in my mind, I don't think that's right. And I think it's disastrous, to be honest with you, based on what we've been waiting for. So I guess my request is, let's get the bridge going before we crack ground on new homes.
Through you, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, to Councillor Taylor, our intention is essentially just that, to ensure that this the Hanson completion segment is completed before home construction begins in this area. With respect to the timing of the road construction within the plans itself, I believe I've discussed that with respect to how these applications will advance, but then there's also our timing of the actual construction of the bridge, and perhaps I'll refer that matter to our General Manager of Infrastructure Services, Mr. Joe Jones, who may be able to speak in a little more detail to that particular project.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Taylor, the actual design work and approvals work for that bridge are currently underway. We have been holding off on moving forward with this project until such time as we saw some movement with Edgewood Valley 2B. As Mr. Ward noted, we didn't want to build a bridge and have a piece of infrastructure sitting there not being used prior to the construction of the road. This does appear to be moving forward now with these public meetings, as well as the draft approval of Edgewood Valley 2B being imminent. And as such, we are carrying a draft project in the 2021 capital budget to actually construct the bridge. So if indeed the development, Edgewood Valley 2B, does continue to move forward at the pace it's moving at, we plan to construct the bridge this coming summer.
And through you, Deputy Mayor, so just for the rest of us watching at home, Mr. Jones, when would a bridge typically, how long would that take? I understand a bridge is expensive and long, but for those of us that aren't in that industry, how long would it take to be, like, when would we be cutting a ribbon based on next summer? Is that January, February of 2022 then, kind of thing? Is that when we open it up and we drive our cars across?
Well, ultimately, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Taylor, ultimately, I would expect that the bridge will be complete before the road is built. Typically, when a subdivision is draft plan approved, and Mr. Hughes and Mr. Ward would know better than I exactly when they'll be coming back to council for draft approval, but assuming it's draft approved in January, it's typically about 18 months before the engineering drawings finally work their way through the approval process for the work to proceed. With that said, oftentimes some grading work can commence before all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed on the engineering drawings. So I'm going to suggest that it's likely that it might be in 2022 before we do see that road connected. But I think that the bridge will be in place and ready when that road gets built.
And so again, like, would that be spring? Excuse me, Deputy Mayor? Spring 20, it's very important. People are going to want to know, right? As a rough.
Through you, Mr. Chair, again to Councillor Taylor, I would give you a more precise estimate if we had one. It really does depend in part on the developer. The developer will be building the connection between the bridge and the existing Hanson Boulevard by Edgewood Valley 2A. And it really depends on how quickly they move through the approval process and what makes sense for them in their development plans. So with that said, perhaps Mr. Hughes could give us a better idea of what their plans are.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Through you, Mr. Chair. The Edgewood 2B plan, we've been working on it for some time. We have already completed a detailed engineering first submission. We haven't yet provided through to the town yet. Draft approval is required ahead of time. So provided we're able to have draft approval in front of council within the next 4 weeks, we anticipate providing our first engineering submission very shortly thereafter. Our intention is to construct that road link as quickly as possible. And, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to, but we'd like to try and match the town's construction program with the bridge. Again, like Mr. Jones mentioned, we've got, engineering drawings that need to be vetted through a variety of different departments, similar to the bridge. And I'm hoping that we can move forward fairly quickly at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Sherwood and then Councillor Peters.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the delegate and perhaps staff. On the map that's showing the three together, you mentioned that there was going to be 6 acres of park. Is that one designated area that's 6 acres, or is that a combination of different areas? And could you point out to me where exactly the park is located? And then I have a follow-up question for staff.
Through Mr. Chair, the park right now is identified within this woodlot area. So we're not certain how much of it will be an active park and how much of it will be a passive park. That depends on future meetings with the Conservation Authority. But the 6-acre park is a woodlot which was never designated as an environmental protection zone in any of the official plans, but we are preserving a fairly large component of it.
So my question to staff is, where is the closest existing park to this development? Perhaps Mr. Osmond or?
Through you, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, to Councillor Sherwood, I'd have to look into a little further as to where specific park facilities are located in proximity to this development. Of course, one of the requirements for subdivision approval under the Planning Act is for conveyance of lands for park purposes or cash in lieu of, depending on what the municipality stipulates for where it wants to see park facilities locate in its jurisdiction, and according to its parks and recreation master plan. So as part of our evaluation of this, we would certainly be in discussions with our parks and recreation division to look at, and with respect to the Parks and Rec master plan, to see if there are indeed facilities planned here, and should we be collecting land to facilitate that, or if not, should we be collecting cash in lieu of that land allocation requirement to subsidize park facilities elsewhere.
If I may as well, Mr. Chair, I wanted to note that the Edgewood Valley Developments Limited property, which is essentially this area, provided many years ago an over-dedication of parkland to accommodate a park or the park in this particular location. So at the time, the entire Edgewood Valley Developments Holdings had contributed its parkland dedication. It did so many years ago. So we were expecting that only Alden Hill and Transmetro Limited would be required to provide, its share of parkland dedication or cash in lieu.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Through you, two quick questions, I think, to two different parties. First, through you to Mr. Ward. You mentioned the conservation boundaries had changed over time. Hoping you could provide clarity on that, whether they grew or shrunk or were just manipulated. And then secondarily to Mr. Jones, given the emphasis and the change to the overall town speed limits, could you comment on whether the roadways in this neighborhood will be designed accordingly, or would they be designed to convention, and then essentially we'd have a bit of a mismatch perhaps in the speed limit to road design ratio, if you will?
Certainly, through you, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, to Councillor Peters, with respect to the natural feature or the open space conservation boundaries, it's been perhaps more of a refinement than a shrinking or expansion. As noted earlier in my presentation, as you perhaps saw in the schedule slides, the boundaries of the open space conservation designation are very general. And what is expected as a development proceeds in proximity to that feature or to that designation, that it submit a study to evaluate the specific features in question, and perhaps make some recommendations as to whether or not there may be any impacts or what sort of separation is appropriate to protect those features from the nearby development. That's submitted and reviewed by Credit Valley Conservation. They in turn also have some standards and requirements they have and apply to developments with respect to appropriate buffer distances from certain features. So it is a bit of an iterative exercise in terms of evaluating the function and attributes of the natural feature, and then determining what's an appropriate setback limit to be established. That's generated through their environmental impact assessment, which is reviewed and to the satisfaction of Credit Valley Conservation.
Thanks.
Councillor Andrews.
Well, thank you very much.
Sorry.
Mayor Tosh. Well, go ahead. Somebody else.
Sorry, I was wondering if Mr. Jones could answer the second part about street design.
Oh, sorry about that.
Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Peters. You're correct. These roads will, based on the recent motion of council, have a 40-kilometer-an-hour speed limit. However, typically roads are designed to handle traffic moving at a slightly higher speed than the posted limit. So I expect that these roads will be designed much like most local roads have been designed in town historically.
Okay, Councillor Peters. Councillor Andrews, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, and I'd like to just compliment my fellow councillors for the great questions posed this evening, because as a resident of this neighborhood for 25 years and putting on my resident hat, it's one that, you know, the number of questions that have been posed are great to hear. A comment and then also a question to Mr. Hughes and Mr. Ward. As for the trail system, I'm appreciative to see that in your presentation, Mr. Hughes, the connection to some of the existing trails. And for those of us who utilize those at times, and I know members of our community will find that as this proposed development comes to fruition, there will be a connection to other trails, especially going towards, I guess, the Island Lake area. As for your comment about the stormwater management pond, if I was correct in hearing what I heard, the Edgewood Valley was responsible for that. Do you anticipate with this development that there might be the possibility of that stormwater management pond to grow or remain the same size?
Through you, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, to Councillor Andrews. The whole purpose of these draft plan approval review exercise is to determine or to establish a level of feasibility. That is, are the blocks and lots appropriately sized and oriented to accommodate the uses and functions proposed within. So as part of this exercise, we're evaluating the stormwater management report information to understand and confirm that the facility proposed within this block is suitable and appropriate for its delineation. So we want to have a level of comfort and certainty that the stormwater management facility is acceptable and appropriate for the development that it serves, to assure that the block that it's situated within is appropriately sized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ward.
Yep. And through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Andrews. The stormwater management design for this community has been a fairly lengthy process. Originally, the Transmetro property had its own dedicated pond, which the Conservation Authority deemed inappropriate. At that time, the larger stormwater management pond was reconfigured, redesigned to accommodate the Transmetro piece, together with the Alden Hill piece and a portion of Edgewood. After that design was completed, we were asked to enlarge the stormwater management pond again, essentially to provide additional quantity control buffers, which seem to be required downstream as part of the Malati Pond. I won't go into the history, but our pond has gone through several design iterations, and we believe now that the existing pond will not need to be made bigger. We have oversized it a little bit, and we have accommodated storm flows which probably exceed what we would have otherwise been required to do.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hughes, for the detail. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from council for either gentleman?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Taylor. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ward, this area that we're looking at, it's onto itself. It's high density housing. And as we come into this situation that we're actually going to approach over the next 48 hours or so, which is significant snow and our rules about parking and whatnot, I fear that the first thing we're going to hear, if whomever is the elected official at the time, is where do I park? And I understand that, you know, you've looked into the ample parking for each unit, but let's face it, as time goes on, 3 cars, 4 cars become a family. The end result here is will we have a lot similar to what we have in town now? So there's 2 lots, 2 official lots for people to park during winter parking as overflow. Will we or could we have something in that area? Because quite frankly, to get out of that area, it's going to be very inconvenient for those residences. Again, they're sort of off in the corner by themselves, which is probably desirable, but it'll be difficult for them when winter parking kicks in. Has any thought been given to that?
Through you, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, to Councillor Taylor, the concept of a dedicated parking lot within this development is not something we have contemplated. The need for such or the use of such hasn't contemplated in our documents that I'm aware of with respect to provision of parking. That is certainly something we'd be evaluating as part of this application, as we would with any application. Not only will the units themselves have to meet our parking requirements of our zoning bylaw, dependent on the unit type, and in particular for the multi-unit developments, the condominium developments, as council may recall, we added a specific visitor parking rate for those units to sort of beef up or enhance the visitor parking component. As part of the more detailed design submission, we would ask the applicant to submit a parking layout plan to understand where might parking, where could that be appropriately situated on roadways, obviously subject to the town's requirements for, you know, where and how parking is permitted on our roadways. It would be subject to our satisfaction.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Follow-up question, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. My last diatribe here is not necessarily a question, it's a plea, and that is, you know, Mr. Hughes, you presented yourself and your clients very well here this evening. I appreciate what you brought forward. You seem like a benevolent organization. My concern is again, if we have houses being developed or people moving into them prior to this roadway opening, it is going to be a major problem for the community and for this council. And I guess I don't fully understand your intentions, and I guess I'm looking for your word, your commitment, your bond, that we'll get the bridge and the street open before we build. And I'd just like your thoughts on that.
If I may, through you, Mr. Chair, I guess the simplest thing to say is I expect that the town will have the bridge ready to be constructed in 21, and will move forward to having it constructed that year with an opening as soon as they can. Our intent is to move forward with our development at the same time, which means the road connecting the existing Hanson to the bridge would be constructed as part of our subdivision development. Of course, nobody can move into these developments until such time as the road network and the services are constructed. So I'm fairly confident that the road networks will be completed and connected to the bridge before anybody in our developments move in, or for that matter, before any houses have even started construction.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Councillor Taylor, I think we all hope for the same thing.
Yes.
Any other questions from council? Seeing none, I'll invite questions or comments from the general public. Is there anyone from the general public with a question?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
It's Carrie Shin.
Go ahead, Ms. Shin.
Oh, hi. My name is Carrie Shin, and I live in Orangeville. And sorry. Hello. Can you still hear me?
Yep, we can still hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, fine. I wanted to read the pages that I had sent in and make some other comments about my concerns. The 2 maps that I received with the first developments that are being proposed, except for the southern point of maybe the 2-18 and the OPZ 2-18 part, are identified, these areas of ground are identified as having high and next to high vulnerability to our drinking water aquifer. Notably wellhead protection area zones for wells 12, 8, 8C, and the new Pullen well. And these are based on the study done by Burnside and Associates in 2010 for the updated aquifer vulnerability for the Pullen Well for Amaranth. Clearly, it is in the interest of developers to privilege Part 1 of the Ontario Planning Act, the OPA, over Part 2. But Part 2 is the indispensable part of the OPA. This addresses the situations that require different planning and unique sustainability issues, like the need to establish a sustainable water supply to be addressed before development is approved. The current environmental assessment for the Pullen Well noted that when the Pullen Well is operational, it will likely draw down some of the water by nearby wells as WHPA Well 12 and 8 and 8C. Therefore, the water from the Pullen Well will mix with the vulnerable wells nearby. These proposed developments effectively invade the well vulnerability zones, therefore affecting drinking water quality and quantity parameters for future water supply from the Pullen Well as well as nearby wells. My concern is these two large subdivisions, and I note that there's even more on their plans, combined with the massive construction disturbance to excavate for new sewers, the sewer system, plus excavation and construction of many housing units, paved parking and roads, will not just provide a pathway to further pollute the aquifer, but also the aquifer will be deprived of the rainwater that now freely enters the water supply from the large remaining greenfield site in Orangeville. I'd like to reiterate that sewers carry E. coli and they will be above the aquifer. Until the Pullen Well is operational, it is just best guessing what will happen underground to a very significant quantity of our drinking water supply with the new Pullen Well. If we get this wrong, there wouldn't be the money to put the aquifer right again. Engineering reports continue to conclude that they can only use best estimates. Real-time movements of water underground are very difficult. I say personally impossible to depend on in advance of the Pullen Well being operational to have any merit. Well 12 already has a burden of pollutants. They arrive from near and far, and they go in quickly on this site particularly. Currently, after treatment on well number 12, 44 organic chemicals are detected in well 12, such as 1,4-dichlorobenzene, 2,3,4,6-tetrachlorophenol, alkylorobenzene, and trichloroethylene, to name a few of the many man-made and car-related contaminants. Yes, the reports for the water supply say that they claim there's no evidence, no exceedance of the drinking water regulations, but we will drink this water every day for many years. For some of these chemicals, there is no safe limit. Add to this pathogens from human waste, which will be in the sewers above the aquifer. There needs to be more amendments to the Orangeville official plan and zoning bylaw amendments, in my opinion, in the future to ensure no negative impact on the new and current water supply to the town of Orangeville. At this time, it is premature to move forward with these two subdivisions on land designated as wellhead vulnerability zones. A new suite of official plans need to follow the Pullen Well operation after at least 2 years, which is the vulnerability period of that piece of land, that large piece of land, or more, to better guide any type of development on these wellhead protection area zones. If indeed any development other than drinking water reservoirs and a water tower are appropriate. I'd like to note that the CVC looks after surface water and flooding. It is up to the town to look after the sewers. And these vulnerable areas, you usually put in water supply and pipes above the sewer, because then you don't have the sewers going into the water. And I'm not convinced that this has been looked at to any degree. And because the Pullen Well is not operational, I don't believe for a minute that we have the information we need to know what is safe to build on this whole site. That's my concern. And I write this as a member of the public. I've been writing as a member of the public. And I'd like to let you know that I have served on a number of complex EA projects on their implementation committees for water and sewage infrastructure in the past. And I'm very concerned about this.
Thank you, Ms. Shin. Mr. Jones, would you care to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a couple of comments with respect to the comments raised by Ms. Shin. Firstly, this being a public meeting for a development of some subdivisions, all of the comments that are received this evening from council, from members of the public, will be answered and brought back to council with explanations, including all of these. She's quite right when she speaks of source water protection. The Clean Water Act is the piece of legislation that oversees the protection of sources of drinking water in the province of Ontario. And under that piece of legislation, significant work has gone into the creation of the Source Water Protection Plan that is overseen by the CTC Source Protection Authority. We have source protection staff on staff at the town who review all development applications to ensure that the policies associated with protecting drinking water are applied as new developments proceed. And the public can be assured that all of this will be reviewed as these developments proceed. The Clean Water Act doesn't prohibit development from proceeding. It simply sets policies that must be met as development proceeds. I did want to make a comment with respect to Ms. Shin's comment on the quality of water at Well 12. The quality of water coming out of Well 12 is excellent. And in fact, the 44 organic compounds that she mentioned have come back as non-detect in the town's most recent annual report. It's available on the town's website. It lists the organic compounds and it lists the results of the sampling. What it doesn't say in those results is that the numbers are zero. What it says is it would give an example of a result as less than, say, 0.5 micrograms per liter. Because the lab won't say zero, it'll just say that the method that we use to test these organic compounds can only test down so far. And there may be a concentration below the level that we can detect. So what they report is that it's not detectable. So there is no evidence to prove to indicate that there are any of these organic compounds in the raw water from Well 12. And in fact, the raw water from Well 12 is quite excellent.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I now call on Connie Thompson. Do you have a question or comments?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm really concerned about the wildlife. Right now, we already have the wildlife coming out into the suburbs. We see deer, we see foxes, we see coyotes. Where are these animals going to go? We're just pushing them further and further out. I'm also concerned about our water. That was a very good presentation that the previous woman provided with regards to our watersheds. I really feel that we are going to run out of water. Are you going to put in another tower for more water? And what will that water source look like? I have many concerns. We are in a rural area. We are going to become more like a city of Brampton, Toronto, whatever, if we continue to build townhouses and condominiums. I'm trying to think of the word for it. There's an appeal to living in Orangeville, is that it's rural and it's a very nice, small, quaint town. Well, we're going to lose that with over 500 more dwellings being built. I just feel like the capacity for Orangeville is, the building capacity has already reached its maximum. We need to preserve some land for parks, for our wildlife, for people, for trails, for walking, for any source of enjoyment that we get. That's just a few of my concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Mr. Jones, do you wish to comment on the water situation?
Certainly, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I can. With respect to water, anytime we draft approve a subdivision or we rezone a piece of land upon which there's going to be a site plan, we do so and we put a holding provision on it. It is a tool that we have in the zoning that requires that the applicant come back to council to lift the hold before they can move ahead with development. One of the primary reasons that we have a hold on there is that we want to ensure that there is adequate water supply and sewage treatment capacity for a development before it is permitted to move forward. And that's one of the key things that we need to do. We do have a limited supply of water in town, and as the previous resident mentioned, we are currently undergoing an environmental assessment to add an additional well, and the work continues on that, and that would add additional supply. You had mentioned a water tower, and while not a source of water, extra storage is needed for fire protection and for peak hours and so forth. We do expect that as development in the northwest quadrant of Orangeville proceeds, that an additional storage reservoir will be required up in that area.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Hughes, do you wish to comment?
I won't comment on water quality or quantity, save and except that as part of our previous developments, we did assist in the development of a well and have a certain amount of water that is reserved for our subdivisions. With respect to wildlife, I wanted to note that the areas of land that we are developing are lands that are currently being farmed. They're currently plowed. And the areas that, if you look at the area that we are trying to preserve as much of the woodlot really as we can. We're working with the Conservation Authority to do that. We have assessed the woodlots and the adjoining tributaries for any wildlife, and we're trying to ensure that we're not disrupting it. We have preserved an area of woodlot that did not need necessarily to be preserved, or should I say it was not ever recognized or included in official plans. So that area of the woodlot we are preserving, and we are constructing what would be a wildlife passage through it to maintain what would be considered a wildlife corridor. So, you know, we are trying our best to accommodate those interests, and we're working very carefully with the Conservation Authority and the town to meet their objectives.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak?
Actually, I was wondering if somebody could address my concerns about Orangeville becoming more like a city. Is any of the town council members concerned that we're going to end up like another city instead of a small town?
Who would like to tackle that? Mayor Brown?
Well, yes, I would. You know, we're under some guidance from the province here, Ms. Thompson.
Yes.
As you know, the town has been slated to grow from 30,000 to 36,000. That's the build out of the urban area of the town. I'm trusting that our town staff is working with developers to do that in a you know, in a properly staged way. We're adding water and sewer resources over time to ensure that everything is infrastructure-wise met. And you know, the town should be growing steadily. We live in an urban environment here. We do not live in a rural environment. This is an urban environment. So I think you know, what we're doing is relying on town staff to ensure that all the Planning Act issues are resolved. These developers do have some property rights. This is not parkland. This is not land owned by the town. This is land owned by commercial interests who have a right to move ahead as long as they meet all the requirements from an environmental standpoint and infrastructure. So I'm quite convinced that our town staff is doing that. These projects take years to be fleshed out, and so very many stakeholders are involved, including the CDC. Environmental, hydrological testing is done. It's a very comprehensive test that has to go down for a developer to get permission to move ahead. So I'm confident that our town staff is doing a good job.
I appreciate your comments. I just thought that, you know what, if we are going to keep more of a country setting, then instead of building 500, why not 250? Why not lots that are half an acre, acre lots. Why not larger land so that people can come up here to do a little bit of gardening in their backyard, you know, have a little space for a pool, whatever. You know, when you have these little townhouses, your concerns are, can we park the cars? Because most people commute, so you have 3 and 4 cars. So it just doesn't make sense to build townhomes and condominiums when we are more rural. That's my concern. I would just hope that it's fine to do, you know, a certain amount of building. Yes, leave parkland, leave room for, you know, open spaces. You don't have to build right on top of each other when we aren't a city. We are a small town.
Right, we did see the presentation, and there was a number of detached homes. There was a number of townhouses and some stacked townhouses. This is a mixed-use development, and you know, the official plan gets reviewed every once in a while. Land is zoned accordingly, and according to the official plan. All of this land is something predates this particular council in terms of its designation. So, you know, as I said before, the landowner has some property rights. They are allowed to move ahead with development, provided they meet all the very stringent requirements, and this developer is doing that. So, you know, I appreciate recreation. I appreciate you know, our natural heritage areas around town, but within the urban environment, you know, development's going to happen. That's just fact.
Mr. Ward, did you care to comment?
Certainly, thank you, Deputy Mayor McIntosh. The comments are certainly well acknowledged, but keep in mind, however, and it was sort of touched on earlier, we are in a provincial policy-driven planning system that essentially says municipalities grow within our settlement areas before we grow outward. It directs that growth to happen in our fully serviced environments where the servicing infrastructure is there and provided and available, as well as the amenities are also available. And it's important to achieve an efficiency with respect to getting our residents sort of concentrated in that environment. I think there was an earlier comment about, you know, a concern about encroaching upon wildlife and the natural areas. Well, if we sort of spread ourselves out and sort of ignore that model of growing within before we grow out, it then perhaps potentially further encroaches on that wildlife and then sort of conflicts with that objective. So it's important to keep in mind that, you know, we do have targets we need to meet, and, you know, as part of that grow within before you grow out model, there are certain density targets we need to achieve for our greenfield area, of which these lands are situated within, and it's important that we do so and meet our planning objectives, basically provided to us by the province. With respect to character, the site does afford a good mixture of unit types. There's single detached dwellings proposed in these plans, which admittedly is not something we have perhaps seen in very recent development activity here. So it is encouraging that there is somewhat more of a diversity or mixture of unit types here. And we certainly have our architectural controls to evaluate this going forward to ensure that the built form is an attractive built environment.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Anybody on council wish to make any further comments? Seeing none, can we have a motion to receive the stuff we've received tonight? Councillor Taylor, Councillor Sherwood. All in favor?
Yes.
Passed. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Mayor Brown.
Here, just confirm there's no one else on the line.
Right. Deputy Mayor, could you just confirm that there's no one else on the line that wishes to speak?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anybody else from the public wishing to speak?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, there is somebody who, with the last digits of their phone number 078, who's still on the call. I'm not sure if they are unmuted, okay. So we can.
Okay, that's Carrie Sheehan. I'm still here.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So we're at the end of our meeting at this moment. Sorry.
Go
go ahead.
Yeah, so we just have a motion to adjourn, please.
No, you're gonna go into closed session, so, right, and then we'll rise and report after that. That's
Okay, my apologies. All right, councilors, we're gonna move into closed now. May I have a motion to move into closed? That, Councilor Taylor, second by Councilor Andrews, all in favor?
Yes.
Okay, we moved into closed,
No.
so.
So we, if I may ask, just for the public's information, we will be moving into a closed session for item 4.2 on our agenda. And as a result of that, that is the last matter that we have to deal with. So this public meeting portion will be recessed, Mr. Mayor, and then we will rise and report. Okay, and for members of council, you have to actually leave this particular meeting and join the meeting invite that I had sent earlier.
Okay, all right, folks, we have to hang up, and we'll catch you at the other link. Thank you. Here, we need a motion that council received some, are we going to say diversity training? Is that, yeah, we received some diversity training. And also we received a report from Mr. Brennan regarding transit. Is that? And that's it. We just received the report on transit. Okay, Councillor Peters is making that motion, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor?
Yes.
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 And a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Post, Councillor Taylor, all in favor?
Yes.
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 Okay, folks, have a good evening.
See ya.
Night, everyone.
Happy birthday, Lisa.
Yes. Happy